r/entitled parents, HOA Karen demands I pay her son's college tuition. The doorbell rang at 8:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, which should have been my first red flag. Normal people don't show up unannounced when you're 3 episodes deep into a Netflix binge, wearing pajama pants that have seen better decades. I opened the door to find Patricia Whitmore standing on my grandmother's, front porch like she owned the place. Which, knowing Patricia, she probably thought she did. As HOA president of Willowbrook Estates, she'd made it her personal mission to remind everyone that she was the self-appointed queen of our little suburban kingdom. "We need to talk," she announced, pushing past me into the foyer before I could object. Her perfectly manicured nails clicked against her designer purse as she surveyed the living room with obvious disdain. "I see you haven't done anything to update this vintage decor." I bit back my first 3 responses, all of which would have involved some creative suggestions about where she could shove her interior design opinions. My grandmother's house was perfect exactly as it was, down to the floral wallpaper and a china cabinet full of delicate teacups I was too afraid to touch. "Patricia, it's almost 9 o'clock. What do you want?" She settled herself on Grandma's favorite armchair without invitation, crossing her legs and fixing me with that predatory smile I'd learned to fear over the past 3 months. Ever since the reading of the will, when half the neighborhood discovered that the sweet old lady next door had left her grandson a house worth $1.2 million and a bank account that made my software engineering salary look like pocket change. "I've been thinking about community responsibility," she began, and I felt my stomach drop. Nothing good ever started with Patricia thinking about responsibility. About how those who are blessed with good fortune should give back to those in need. "Okay," I said slowly, still standing by the door like I could somehow make her evaporate through sheer willpower. "My Brandon, as you know, is such a bright boy. So much potential." Her voice took on that syrupy tone that every parent uses when they're about to ask for something unreasonable. "But the college admissions process these days is just so unfair. They rejected him from Whitmore University, can you believe that? A school that shares our family name." I could believe it, actually. I'd had the misfortune of meeting Brandon at several HOA events, where he'd made it clear that he considered community service beneath him and homework a suggestion rather than a requirement. But I kept my mouth shut and waited for the other shoe to drop. He's been accepted to several private institutions, of course. Excellent schools that recognize his true potential. Patricia's smile sharpened. "But the tuition is quite substantial. $60,000 a year." The silence stretched between us like a taut wire. Outside, I could hear the automatic sprinklers kicking on across the neighborhood, a gentle whisper that seemed to mock the tension building in my grandmother's living room. That's a lot," I managed finally. "Yes," she agreed, leaning forward with the intensity of a shark scenting blood. "Which is why I've come to you. You've been so blessed, Derek. Inheriting all of this when you're so young, when you already have a good job. Surely you understand that with great fortune comes great responsibility to your community." And there it was. The ask. The demand wrapped in silk and delivered with a smile that never reached her eyes. "You want me to pay for Brandon's college tuition," I said, the words coming out flat and disbelieving. "I prefer to think of it as an investment in our community's future," Patricia replied smoothly, like she'd rehearsed this pitch in front of a mirror. "Brandon is going to do great things. And when he does, he'll remember who believed in him. Who helped make it possible." I stared at her, waiting for the punchline that never came. She was serious. Completely, utterly serious. "Patricia, I barely know your son. We've exchanged maybe 10 words total, and half of those were him complaining about having to pick up trash at the community cleanup day." Her smile flickered but held firm. "Derek, I think you're misunderstanding the situation here. This isn't charity I'm asking for. This is about being a good neighbor. A contributing member of our community." The way she emphasized contributing made my skin crawl. Like somehow I hadn't been contributing enough by keeping my lawn mowed and my music at reasonable volumes. "I appreciate that college is expensive," I said carefully, "but I'm not in a position to." "Oh, but you are." She cut me off with a wave of her hand. "You absolutely are. We all know about your inheritance, Derek. This house alone is worth over $1 million, not to mention whatever else your grandmother left you." Heat flashed through me. The idea of this woman calculating my grandmother's net worth like she was appraising livestock made me want to throw her out physically. But I forced myself to stay calm. "My personal finances aren't really your business. Aren't they?" Patricia stood up, smoothing down her skirt with deliberate precision. "I've been president of this HOA for 8 years, Derek. 8 years of keeping this neighborhood beautiful, maintaining our property values, ensuring that only the right sort of people live here. Your grandmother understood that. She was always so generous with the community fund." My jaw tightened. Grandma had mentioned the community fund exactly once, calling it Patricia's little slush fund, and rolling her eyes. "And now here you are," Patricia continued, beginning to pace around my living room like she owned it, sitting on all this wealth while a deserving young man's future hangs in the balance. "It just seems selfish, don't you think?" "Selfish?" The word came out sharper than I intended. "I worked 2 jobs through college while taking care of my grandmother during her chemo treatments. I've been paying off student loans for 6 years. But I'm selfish for not handing over $60,000 to a kid who thinks showing up is the same as earning something." Patricia's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing something cold and calculating underneath. "That's exactly the kind of attitude I'm talking about. This community has been very good to you, Derek. Very welcoming. It would be a shame if that changed." "Is that a threat?" "Of course not," she said, her smile returning full force. "It's just that sometimes people forget how many little rules and regulations come with living in a place like Willowbrook Estates. The landscaping requirements, the paint color approvals, the noise ordinances. So many things that need to be monitored closely. Especially when it comes to properties that might not be up to current standards." She gestured vaguely at the wallpaper, at my grandmother's carefully maintained but admittedly dated decor. "I'd hate for you to start receiving violations over little oversights. The fines can really add up, you know." My hands clenched into fists at my sides. "Get out of my house." "Think about it, Derek," Patricia said pleasantly, heading toward the door. Brandon needs an answer by Friday. The door had barely closed behind Patricia when my phone started buzzing. A text from an unknown number, *Hey neighbor. Just wanted to give you a heads up about some potential HOA violations I noticed. Wouldn't want you to be surprised. Patricia *. Attached were photos. 6 of them. My grandmother's garden gate, which was apparently non-regulation forest green instead of the required heritage green. The small wind chime hanging from the porch, photographed from an angle that made it look massive, with a caption about excessive noise-producing decorations. Even a close-up of a tiny chip in the paint on my front door that I'd never noticed, circled in red like evidence at a crime scene. I screenshot everything and forwarded it to my buddy Mike, adding, *Is it legal for HOA presidents to extort people? Asking for a friend, *. His response came back immediately, *, holy shit dude. That's not even subtle. You documenting this, *. Smart man. I started a new folder on my phone, Patricia's greatest hits. Wednesday morning, I woke up to find a bright yellow notice zip tied to my mailbox. First notice of violation was printed in aggressive red letters across the top. Apparently, I had 72 hours to remedy the non-compliant garden gate color or face a $50 fine. The notice was signed with Patricia's signature flourish and stamped with an official-looking HOA seal. I photographed it from every angle, then called the number listed for violation appeals. Whitmore residence, Patricia speaking. Of course she handled her own appeals process. It's Derek Chen. I received a violation notice about my gate, and I have some questions. Oh, wonderful. I was hoping you'd call. Have you had a chance to consider our conversation from last night? My gate has been the same color for 15 years. My grandmother never received any violations. A pause. Well, we've recently updated our standards to better reflect the community's evolving aesthetic goals. I'm sure you understand. I'd like to see the documentation showing when this color change was approved by the community vote. Another pause, longer this time. Derek, I really think you're focusing on the wrong things here. These little issues could all go away so easily if you just. I want to see the documentation, Patricia. Fine. It'll be in your email within the hour. But Derek? Friday is still Brandon's deadline. Don't wait too long to do the right thing. The email never came. By Thursday, 3 more violation notices had appeared. My house numbers were apparently mounted 1/4 inch too low on the mailbox post. The small succulent garden my grandmother had lovingly maintained was cited for non-approved decorative elements in the front yard landscape zone. And my car, my perfectly ordinary Honda Civic, was flagged for commercial vehicle parking because I had a laptop bag visible in the back seat. Each fine was $50. Each notice came with the same helpful suggestion to contact HOA administration to discuss resolution options. I'd started taking photos of everything, documenting timestamps, saving every text message. My software engineering brain was already working through the problem like debugging code. There had to be a pattern, a vulnerability in Patricia's system. Thursday evening, I drove through the neighborhood with fresh eyes. Really looked at the other houses for the first time since I'd inherited Grandma's place. The Hendersons had garden gnomes that were definitely non-regulation. Mrs. Kim's mailbox was painted bright red instead of the apparently required heritage green. And 3 houses down, the Patels had wind chimes twice the size of mine hanging from every corner of their wraparound porch. Not a single violation notice in sight. My phone buzzed with another text from Patricia, * still thinking about our chat. Tomorrow's the big day. Don't disappoint Brandon. Smiling face with smiling eyes *. I screenshot it and added it to the folder. Time to do some research. Friday morning hit me like a freight train. I'd spent most of the night digging through HOA documents, cross-referencing property records, and mapping out every violation notice issued in the past year. What I found was both infuriating and incredibly useful. Patricia had issued exactly 47 violations in the past 12 months. 43 of them had gone to just 5 households, all recent arrivals to the neighborhood, all inherited properties, and all belonging to people under 40. The remaining 4 violations had been issued to longtime residents, but only after those residents had publicly disagreed with Patricia at community meetings. Meanwhile, her own house, a sprawling McMansion with a bright blue front door that was definitely not heritage green, had never received a single citation. I was printing out spreadsheets when my doorbell rang at exactly 9 a.m. Patricia stood on my porch wearing her power suit and victory smile, with Brandon lurking behind her like a sullen shadow. Up close, the kid looked exactly like what he was, a spoiled 18-year-old who'd probably never worked a day in his life. Designer sneakers, expensive haircut, and the kind of entitled slouch that screamed, "The world owes me something." "Good morning, Derek." Patricia's voice had the fake cheerfulness of a game show host. "I brought Brandon along so he could thank you personally." "Thank me for what?" "For doing the right thing, of course. Brandon's been so excited about starting at Westfield Academy in the fall. Haven't you, sweetheart?" Brandon mumbled something that might have been agreement, his eyes glued to his phone screen. "I haven't agreed to anything," I said carefully. Patricia's smile tightened. "Oh, but I'm sure you will. Especially after you see what I found during my morning inspection." She pulled out her phone and showed me a photo of my back fence. "That's a major structural violation right there. The fence posts are a full 2 inches into the community easement. That's a $500 fine, and you'll need to tear down the entire back fence and rebuild it." My stomach dropped. The fence had been there since before I was born. "That's impossible. My grandmother had the property surveyed when." "Surveys can be wrong," Patricia said with a shrug. "And unfortunately, the HOA bylaw 47C is very clear about encroachment violations. Of course, if you're dealing with other priorities, like helping a deserving community member, I might be persuaded to order a resurvey. These things can take months to resolve." Brandon finally looked up from his phone. "Mom, can we just get this over with? I want to go meet Tyler at the mall." "In a minute, honey." Patricia turned back to me. "So, Derek, how would you like to handle Brandon's tuition payment? I can give you the bursar's office information, or if you prefer to write a check directly to me, I can handle the transfer." The casual way she said it, like I was paying for pizza instead of being extorted for $60,000, made my vision go red. You want me to write you a personal check for 60 grand? However's easiest for you. I know you tech people prefer everything digital these days. That's when I noticed Mrs. Chen from next door had come out to water her plants. And Mr. Rodriguez across the street was very slowly washing his car, clearly eavesdropping. Patricia had timed this perfectly, maximum public pressure. You know what? I said, loud enough for the neighbors to hear clearly. Let me get my checkbook. Patricia's eyes lit up with triumph. Wonderful. I knew you'd see reason. I stepped back inside, leaving the door open. This'll just take a minute. What I grabbed wasn't my checkbook. I walked back to the door carrying my laptop and the stack of printed documents I'd been compiling all night. Patricia was practically bouncing on her toes, already planning her victory lap. Brandon had wandered over to examine my grandmother's rose bushes, probably calculating how much more money he could squeeze out of me for his expenses. Actually, before we handle the payment, I said, setting my laptop on the porch table, I wanted to show you something interesting I discovered. Patricia's smile flickered. Derek, we really don't need to overcomplicate this. Did you know, I continued, opening my laptop and turning the screen toward her, that every single violation notice you've issued in the past year has been documented in the county's public HOA database. It's all searchable online. Her face went pale. I don't see how that's relevant. Oh, it gets better. I clicked to my first spreadsheet. 47 total violations. 43 of them issued to just 5 households. All inherited properties. All residents under 40. Statistically speaking, that's not random enforcement, that's targeted harassment. Mrs. Chen had stopped pretending to water her plants and was openly listening now. Mr. Rodriguez had actually moved closer, his car completely forgotten. Furthermore, I said, clicking to the next tab, according to the HOA bylaws you made me sign when I inherited the house, violation notices can only be issued after 3 separate community members file complaints. So I pulled all the complaint records. Patricia was backing toward the porch steps. Derek, this is really unnecessary. Funny thing about those complaint records. They're all filed by the same 3 people. Patricia Morrison, William Morrison, that's your husband, right? And I squinted at the screen. Barbara Morrison. Your mother-in-law, according to the property records. Brandon finally looked up from his phone. Mom, what's he talking about? It gets even more interesting, I continued, warming up. Because according to Bylaw 23A, HOA board members and their immediate family can't file violation complaints due to obvious conflict of interest. Which means every single notice you've issued in the past year has been completely invalid. Patricia's power suit seemed to deflate. You can't prove. I can prove all of it. Digital paper trail. I clicked to another tab showing her house. Speaking of violations, I did a little walking survey last night. Your front door is painted ocean breeze blue according to the paint chip I found in your garbage. That's not heritage green. Your mailbox numbers are in a decorative script font instead of the required block letters. And unless I'm mistaken, that ornamental fountain in your front yard violates at least 3 different landscaping regulations. The color drained completely from her face. But here's my favorite part, I said, pulling up the final document. I found the financial records you filed with the county last year. You know, the ones that show exactly how the HOA's collected fines get distributed. Patricia lunged for my laptop. You had no right to access. Public records, Patricia. All perfectly legal. I tilted the screen away from her. Looks like the HOA collected about 4,000 in violation fines last year. And according to your own financial filing, every penny went to administrative costs paid to Morrison Consulting LLC. That's your husband's company, isn't it? Brandon was staring at his mother now. Mom, you said the college money was from Dad's business. Shut up, Brandon, Patricia snapped, then immediately tried to recover. I mean, sweetie, this isn't. So let me make sure I understand, I said loudly enough for half the block to hear. You've been running an extortion racket against your neighbors, funneling the money to your family business, and now you want to shake me down for 60 grand to pay for your kid's college because he couldn't get in anywhere on his own merit. Patricia was trembling now, whether from rage or panic I couldn't tell. You have no idea what you're dealing with, she whispered. Actually, I said, closing the laptop with a satisfied click, I think I know exactly what I'm dealing with. The question is, what are you going to do about it? Patricia's face cycled through several shades of red before settling on a dangerous purple. You think you're so smart, she hissed, her fake cheerfulness completely evaporated. But you have no idea how things work around here. Mom, Brandon said, tugging at her sleeve. Can we just go? This is embarrassing. She shook him off without taking her eyes off me. You want to play games? Fine. Let's play games. She pulled out her phone and started typing furiously. I'm calling an emergency HOA meeting for tonight. And I'm recommending immediate legal action against you for harassment, trespassing, and theft of confidential documents. Public records aren't confidential, I pointed out. We'll see what the lawyers say about that. Her fingers were flying across her screen. And that fence violation? I'm upgrading it to an emergency structural issue. That's a $1,000 daily fine until it's resolved. Hope you've got deep pockets. Mrs. Chen had given up all pretense and was now standing at her property line, openly watching the show. Mr. Rodriguez had been joined by the family from 2 doors down. Great. This was exactly the kind of neighborhood drama my grandmother would have hated. You know what's funny? I said, keeping my voice calm despite the adrenaline coursing through me. I actually do have pretty deep pockets. Deep enough that I can afford to lawyer up and fight every single one of your made-up violations. Can you? Patricia's typing paused for just a second. Don't test me. I'm not testing you. I'm just wondering how Williams' consulting business is going to handle the legal fees when a county starts auditing your HOA finances. Because that's what happens when someone files a formal complaint about financial irregularities in a homeowners association. Brandon was looking between us like he was watching a tennis match. Mom, what's he talking about? What financial irregularities? Nothing, sweetheart. He's just making threats he can't back up. Actually, I said, pulling out my own phone, I already drafted the complaint last night. Haven't filed it yet, but it's ready to go. One click and the county gets a very detailed report about HOA fund mismanagement, falsified violation records, and potential embezzlement. Patricia went very still. You wouldn't dare. Try me. The silence stretched out between us, broken only by the sound of Brandon's phone buzzing with notifications he was ignoring for once. I could practically hear the gears turning in Patricia's head as she calculated her options. Fine, she said finally. Keep your money. But don't think this is over. Oh, I don't think it's over at all, I replied. Because you still need to explain to the community how you've been stealing from them for years. I haven't stolen anything. Morrison Consulting LLC disagrees with that assessment. She grabbed Brandon's arm and started marching toward the street. Come on, we're leaving. But Mom, what about? Not now, Brandon. I watched them storm off toward their McMansion, Patricia's heels clicking angrily on the sidewalk. But as they reached their driveway, I saw her pull out her phone again and make a call. Even from this distance, I could see the animated gestures, the angry pointing back toward my house. Mrs. Chen approached my fence line. Derek, dear, she said quietly, you might want to be careful. Patricia doesn't handle losing very well. What do you mean? 3 years ago, the Hendersons at the end of the block challenged one of her violation notices. Their car got keyed. Their sprinkler system got vandalized twice. They ended up selling the house and moving. My stomach dropped. Why didn't anyone report her? Mrs. Chen gave me a sad smile. Who would we report her to? She runs the HOA. That night, I barely slept. Every little sound had me checking the windows, a car door slamming, footsteps on the sidewalk, even the neighbor's cat knocking over a trash can. Mrs. Chen's warning about the Hendersons kept replaying in my head. I'd been so focused on outsmarting Patricia that I hadn't considered she might escalate beyond legal threats. Around 3 a.m., I finally gave up on sleep and started researching everything I could find about the Henderson situation. Property records showed they bought their house in 2018 and sold it in 2021 for $30,000 less than they'd paid. The sale listing mentioned motivated sellers and priced for quick sale, real estate code for people desperate to get out. I found their old violation notices in a county database. 18 citations in 6 months, everything from mailbox positioning to unauthorized window treatments. The complaints were all filed by the same 3 people, Patricia, William, and Barbara Morrison. By morning, I'd made a decision. I wasn't going to wait for Patricia to make the first move. I called in sick to work and drove to the county offices. The clerk in the HOA compliance department, a tired-looking woman named Janet, listened patiently as I explained the situation and handed over my printed documentation. Oh honey, she said, flipping through the pages, this is definitely problematic. The complaint filing irregularities alone are enough to invalidate most of these violations. She paused at the financial records. And this looks like structured embezzlement. How long does an investigation usually take? I asked. Depends on how cooperative the HOA board is. Could be weeks, could be months. Janet stamped my complaint form. But I'll tell you what, I'm flagging this as priority. We've had other complaints about this particular association. Other complaints? Can't give you details, but you're not the first person to come in here with concerns about Ms. Morrison's management style. I left the county office feeling cautiously optimistic, but that feeling evaporated when I turned onto my street. There was a massive truck parked in front of my house with emergency tree removal painted on the side. Patricia stood on my front lawn directing 2 workers toward my grandmother's prized Japanese maple, the one I'd spent hours photographing for the violation dispute. I pulled into my driveway and jumped out of my car. What the hell are you doing? Patricia turned with a satisfied smirk. Emergency removal of hazardous vegetation. That tree is diseased and poses an immediate danger to the community. That tree is perfectly healthy. According to our certified arborist, it shows signs of advanced rot. She waved a piece of paper. We're authorized to remove dangerous trees at the homeowner's expense when they pose an imminent threat. I looked at the certified arborist, a guy in a stained t-shirt who was currently trying to figure out how to start his chainsaw. Let me see that authorization. HOA emergency powers, Derek. We don't need your permission. One of the workers had gotten his chainsaw running and was approaching the base of the tree. My grandmother had planted that maple the year I was born. She used to say it was our family tree, growing stronger every year. Stop. I shouted, stepping between the worker and the tree. You're not touching it. Patricia pulled out her phone. If you interfere with official HOA business, I'm calling the police for criminal trespass. Criminal trespass. On my own property. The tree is in violation of community safety standards. Interfering with its removal is obstruction of official duties. The worker with the chainsaw looked uncomfortable. Lady, I don't want any part of this if there's going to be police involved. There won't be police if he just steps aside, Patricia said, but her confidence seemed forced. This is a routine safety procedure. I pulled out my own phone and started recording. State your name and show me your arborist certification. I don't have to show you anything, chainsaw guy said, but he was already backing away from the tree. Actually, I said, still recording, if you're operating as a certified professional on residential property, you do. I turned the camera toward Patricia. And I'd love to hear more about these emergency powers that let you destroy someone's property without a court order. Patricia's face was getting that dangerous purple color again. Fine. We'll do this the hard way. She dialed a number. William. Get down here now. And bring the police contact information. This was spiraling out of control fast, but I wasn't backing down. That tree was staying exactly where it was. The workers were packing up their equipment when William's BMW pulled up behind the tree removal truck. He got out wearing what looked like an expensive suit, but his face had that same harried expression I'd seen at the community meeting. What's the situation here? He asked Patricia, not even acknowledging my presence. Derek is interfering with emergency tree removal. We need to call Officer Martinez. William glanced at me, then at the tree, then back at Patricia. Honey, maybe we should. Don't honey me in front of the neighbors, she snapped. Just make the call. I kept recording as William reluctantly pulled out his phone. But before he could dial, Mrs. Chen appeared at her front door. Patricia Morrison, she called out, her usually gentle voice carrying surprising authority. What exactly are you doing to that boy's tree? Community safety business, Eleanor. Nothing that concerns you. Everything that happens in this neighborhood concerns me. I've lived here for 37 years. Mrs. Chen walked over to examine the maple. This tree is healthier than half the people on this street. 2 more neighbors had come out, the Johnsons from across the street and Mr. Patterson from next door. I could see curtains twitching in windows up and down the block. Ma'am, said the chainsaw operator, I think we're gonna head out. This doesn't feel right. Patricia whirled on him. You have a contract. Contract says remove diseased tree. This tree ain't diseased. He gestured to his partner. Come on, Tommy. Load it up. You can't just leave. Patricia's voice was climbing toward hysteria. I'm paying you. You can keep the deposit, lady. We're not cutting down healthy trees for some HOA drama. As the truck pulled away, I could see Patricia calculating her next move. The small crowd of neighbors was growing, and she clearly hadn't expected this level of attention. Show's over, everyone, she announced. This is a private HOA matter. Actually, said Mr. Patterson, I'd like to know more about these emergency powers you mentioned. I've been on HOA boards before, and I've never heard of anything like that. William cleared his throat. The bylaws allow for immediate action in cases of. Which section? Mr. Patterson interrupted. I've got a copy of the bylaws right here on my phone. I watched William's face go pale. Well, it's more of an implied authority. Implied authority to destroy someone's property? Mrs. Chen shook her head. Patricia, this has gone too far. Eleanor, you have no idea what you're talking about. I know you've been harassing this young man ever since he inherited Margaret's house. I know you've been making up violations left and right. And I know Margaret would be ashamed to see how you're treating her grandson. The mention of my grandmother hit Patricia like a slap. Her face went through several color changes before settling on a dangerous shade of red. Don't you dare bring Margaret into this. She was just as much a problem as he is. The street went dead quiet. Even I stopped recording for a second, shocked by the venom in her voice. Margaret was a pillar of this community, Mrs. Chen said quietly. She organized the neighborhood watch, she coordinated meal trains for sick neighbors, and she never once used her position to bully anyone. Her position? Patricia laughed bitterly. What position? She was nobody special. She was HOA president for 12 years before you took over, Mr. Patterson said. And in all that time, I never once saw a frivolous violation notice. I could see the realization dawning on Patricia's face that she'd miscalculated badly. The neighbors weren't just watching anymore, they were actively turning against her. But that only seemed to make her more desperate. You know what? Patricia's voice dropped to a venomous whisper that somehow carried further than her shouting had. I've been way too patient with all of you. She turned to face the small crowd of neighbors. You think Margaret was so wonderful? You want to know what your precious saint was really like? Mrs. Chen stepped forward. Patricia, don't. She was covering for him. Patricia pointed an accusatory finger at me. Margaret knew her druggy grandson was dealing out of her house, and she protected him. The street erupted. 3 neighbors started talking at once. Mr. Patterson was shaking his head, and I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. That's completely insane, I managed to say, but Patricia was just getting started. Oh, is it? Then explain why there were always different cars coming and going at all hours. Explain that the computer repair business he claimed to be running out of her garage. She made air quotes with such aggressive sarcasm that her wedding ring caught the sunlight like a weapon. What 18-year-old has customers visiting at midnight? I was building websites for small businesses, I said, my voice shaking with anger. And those cars were medical equipment deliveries, nurses, and physical therapists. My grandmother had COPD. Convenient excuse, Patricia sneered. William, tell them about the complaints we received. William looked like he wanted to disappear into the pavement. Honey, maybe this isn't the time. Tell them. There were some noise complaints, he said reluctantly. Late at night. I stared at him in disbelief. Noise complaints about what? My grandmother's oxygen concentrator. Her nebulizer treatments at 2 a.m. because she couldn't breathe. Mrs. Chen's face had gone pale. Patricia, you filed noise complaints about Margaret's medical equipment. I filed complaints about suspicious activity. The noise was just part of it. She was dying. I shouted, and my voice cracked on the words. She was dying, and I was 17 years old trying to take care of her, and you were filing complaints because her breathing machine was too loud for you. The neighbors were staring at Patricia with something approaching horror, but she doubled down. A likely story. If she was so sick, why wasn't she in a nursing home? Because she wanted to die in her own house. The words ripped out of me. Because she raised me in that house after my parents died, and I wasn't going to abandon her to some facility where she'd be miserable and alone. How touching, Patricia said with mock sympathy. And I'm sure the inheritance had nothing to do with your dedication. That crossed a line I didn't even know existed. I took a step toward her, my hands clenched into fists, and William actually moved between us. Derek, Mrs. Chen said softly, don't let her bait you. But Patricia wasn't done. You know what I think? I think you've been planning this from the beginning. I think you moved back here specifically to cash in on Margaret's death, and now you're trying to destroy the HOA because we're the only thing standing between you and turning this neighborhood into your personal drug operation. Patricia. Mr. Patterson's voice cut through her rant. Enough. Oh, so now you're all going to protect the dealer. We're protecting our neighbor from your insane accusations, Mrs. Chen said firmly. And if you don't stop this right now, I'm calling the police myself. Patricia's smile turned predatory. Go ahead. Call them. I've got documentation going back years about suspicious activity at that house. Let's see what they make of Derek's story. My blood ran cold. She was bluffing. She had to be bluffing. But what if she wasn't? The threat hung in the air like poison gas. I could see the doubt creeping into some of my neighbors' faces, not because they believed Patricia's insane accusations, but because she sounded so confident about her documentation. You know what? I pulled out my phone again. Let's call them right now. Patricia's smile faltered for just a second before returning full force. Perfect. I'll get my files. While you do that, I said, my voice steadier than I felt, maybe I should mention that filing false police reports is a felony. So is harassment and filing fraudulent HOA violations. Nothing fraudulent about protecting property values, she shot back, but William was looking increasingly uncomfortable. Mrs. Chen stepped closer to me. Derek, what kind of documentation could she possibly have? Photos of cars in my driveway, probably. Timestamps of when my grandmother's medical equipment was running. Maybe records of the computer equipment I ordered for my freelance work. I looked directly at Patricia. All perfectly legal activities that she's going to try to twist into something sinister. Speaking of documentation, Mr. Patterson said slowly, I've been keeping my own records. Patricia, didn't you try to get Derek's grandmother cited for excessive medical deliveries about 3 years ago? Patricia's face went white. That was about traffic congestion. Traffic congestion from an oxygen delivery truck that came once a month. I felt something click into place. You've been building a file on my family for years, haven't you? Just waiting for a chance to use it. I document everything suspicious in this neighborhood. That's called being thorough. No, Mrs. Chen said quietly, that's called stalking. The word hit Patricia like a physical blow. She actually staggered back a step before recovering. How dare you? I am the elected president of this HOA, and I have every right to monitor compliance. You have the right to enforce legitimate violations, Mr. Patterson interrupted. You don't have the right to spy on families dealing with medical crises. William finally found his voice. Patricia, maybe we should just go home, Anne. Don't you start, she whirled on her husband. I have spent 4 years trying to maintain standards in this neighborhood while dealing with freeloaders and troublemakers, and I am not backing down now. For years. Mrs. Chen's eyebrows rose. Margaret was president when Derek moved in with her. You only took over after she got too sick to attend meetings. Because someone had to step up. Someone had to make the hard decisions. What hard decisions? I demanded. What exactly has been so hard about your job? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you've spent 4 years harassing a sick old woman and her teenage grandson because you couldn't stand that they didn't bow down to you. Patricia's breathing was getting rapid and shallow. You have no idea what I've had to deal with. The complaints, the violations, the constant. What complaints? Mr. Patterson pulled out his phone. I've got the neighborhood group chat going back 2 years. The only complaints I see are the ones you filed yourself. That's not, people call me directly. Patricia, Mrs. Chen said gently, who calls you? About what? The question seemed to break something in Patricia's composure. She looked around at the circle of neighbors, and I could see her realizing that none of them were on her side. Not even William, who was staring at the ground like he wished it would swallow him. Fine, she said, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. You want to protect him? Go ahead. But when property values start dropping because of his activities, don't come crying to me. She turned and stalked toward her house, leaving William standing awkwardly in the street. I'm sorry, he said quietly, not looking at any of us. She's been under a lot of stress lately. Then he hurried after his wife, leaving the rest of us standing around my perfectly healthy maple tree. The silence after William disappeared into their house was deafening. I could hear my heart pounding in my ears as I looked around at my neighbors' faces. Mrs. Chen was the first to speak. Derek, I am so sorry. I had no idea she'd been documenting things like that. It's not your fault, I said, but my voice sounded hollow even to me. The adrenaline was starting to wear off, and I was beginning to process what had just happened. Patricia hadn't just accused me of being a drug dealer in front of half the neighborhood, she'd weaponized my grandmother's illness against me. Mr. Patterson was scrolling through his phone. I'm going through the HOA meeting minutes from when Margaret was sick. Patricia, there are violation notices here I don't remember voting on. My stomach dropped. What kind of violations? Excessive noise during quiet hours. Unsightly medical equipment visible from the street. Increased traffic disrupting neighborhood peace. He looked up at me, his face grim. Derek, these are all dated from when your grandmother was in hospice care. Mrs. Chen gasped. She was filing violations against a dying woman. It gets worse, Mr. Patterson continued reading. There's a formal complaint about transient individuals staying overnight without proper guest registration. That's probably referring to you, Derek. I felt sick. Guest registration. There's no such thing in our bylaws. No, there isn't. But she marked these as under review for policy development. Mr. Patterson's jaw was tight. She's been creating a paper trail of fictional violations. Why? Mrs. Chen asked. What was the point? I knew the answer before I said it. Ammunition. She was building a case to force us out. The pieces were falling into place with horrible clarity. Think about it, she files enough violations, calls them a pattern of non-compliance, and suddenly she has grounds to push for legal action. But Margaret owned her house outright, Mr. Patterson protested. Doesn't matter. Enough HOA violations can result in liens, fines, even forced sales in extreme cases. I ran my hands through my hair. My grandmother was too sick to fight back, and I was too young to understand what was happening. Mrs. Chen's phone buzzed. She glanced at it and her face went pale. Oh no. What? It's from the neighborhood Facebook group. Patricia just posted something. She showed me her screen, and my blood turned to ice. The post read, Neighbors, I feel it's my duty to inform you that concerning activities at 847 Maple Street require our immediate attention. For years, I've documented suspicious behavior that threatens our community's safety and property values. Tonight's confrontation only confirmed my worst fears. I urge everyone to be vigilant and report any unusual activity to local authorities. Our children's safety depends on it. Patricia Morrison, HOA President. She's trying to turn the whole neighborhood against you, Mr. Patterson said, reading over Mrs. Chen's shoulder. My phone started buzzing. Text messages from neighbors I barely knew, asking if I was okay, if the rumors were true, demanding explanations. The comments on Patricia's post were already piling up, some supportive of her, others questioning her claims, but all of them talking about me. This is insane, I muttered, scrolling through the notifications. She just labeled me a threat to children based on absolutely nothing. We need to respond to this, Mrs. Chen said firmly. We can't let her control the narrative. With what? The truth? I laughed bitterly. Look at these comments. Half the people are already convinced I'm dangerous because Patricia sounds so official. Mr. Patterson was typing furiously on his phone. I'm posting the meeting minutes. People need to see what she's really been doing. But I was already thinking 3 steps ahead, and I didn't like where this was heading. Patricia had just declared war, and she'd chosen her battlefield carefully. Social media, neighborhood gossip, fear-mongering, these were weapons that could destroy someone's reputation long before any facts came to light. My phone rang. Unknown number. Hello. Is this Derek Chen at 847 Maple Street? This is Officer Rodriguez with Metro PD. We've received some concerning reports about your address. My blood turned to ice. What kind of reports, officer? We've had multiple calls tonight about suspicious activity at your address. Drug-related concerns, possible dealing. I'm actually in the area, would you mind if I stop by to have a quick conversation? I looked around at my neighbors, who were all watching me with varying degrees of concern and curiosity. Mrs. Chen grabbed my arm supportively, but I could see the worry in her eyes. Of course, officer. I'll be here. Great. I'll be there in about 10 minutes. The call ended, and the silence stretched between us like a taut wire. She actually called the police, Mr. Patterson said, his voice filled with disbelief. She called the police and filed false reports. We don't know it was her, Mrs. Chen said, but she didn't sound convinced. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a notification from the neighborhood app. 3 more safety alerts had been posted in the last 5 minutes, all about my address. The alerts were anonymous, but they all used suspiciously similar language about community safety and protecting property values. Multiple calls, I said slowly. The officer said multiple calls. She's not just posting online, she's actively calling in reports. Mr. Patterson's phone rang. He answered it, walking a few steps away, then came back looking grim. That was my wife. She says the Facebook post has been shared to 4 other neighborhood groups. People are talking about organizing a community meeting. A community meeting about what? About me? The absurdity of it would have been funny if it weren't so terrifying. 24 hours ago, nobody in this neighborhood even knew my name. Now they want to hold meetings about whether I'm a threat. Mrs. Chen was scrolling through her phone, her frown deepening. Derek, there are people in the comments claiming they've seen suspicious visitors at your house. People I've never even heard of. What suspicious visitors? But even as I asked, I knew the answer. My freelance clients who came by to pick up completed projects. The delivery drivers bringing equipment. The contractors I'd hired to fix the roof last month. She's been watching, I realized. All this time, she's been documenting everything, waiting for the right moment to weaponize it. Red and blue lights appeared at the end of the street. Okay, Mr. Patterson said, straightening up. We're all staying right here as witnesses. Patricia might have called this in, but she's not controlling the conversation. Officer Rodriguez was younger than I'd expected, with kind eyes and a professional demeanor that immediately put me somewhat at ease. He approached our group calmly, his hand nowhere near his weapon. Mr. Chen. Thanks for agreeing to speak with me. I hope you don't mind, I see you've got some neighbors here. They're staying, I said firmly. Whatever you need to ask me, they can hear. Fair enough. Look, I'll be straight with you, we've had several calls tonight reporting possible drug activity at this address. Anonymous tips through our hotline. I'm required to follow up, but I want you to know that I drove by earlier and didn't observe anything concerning. What kind of drug activity am I supposedly involved in? Officer Rodriguez consulted his notepad. Strange visitors at odd hours. Packages being delivered frequently. People described as sketchy, coming and going. One caller mentioned seeing what looked like equipment being moved around. Mrs. Chen stepped forward. Officer, this is absolutely ridiculous. Derek runs a legitimate business from his home. He inherited this house from his grandmother 6 months ago, and ever since then, our HOA president has been harassing him. Harassing him how? Mr. Patterson pulled out his phone. I can show you the fake violations she's been filing. The social media posts she made tonight. She literally accused him of being a drug dealer in front of all of us not 30 minutes ago. Officer Rodriguez's expression shifted subtly. Someone accused you of dealing drugs publicly? Tonight? Patricia Morrison, I said. She's the HOA president. She's been filing false violations against my family for years, and tonight she showed up at my door demanding I pay for her son's college tuition. She what? And that's when I realized that no matter how crazy this situation had become, the truth was actually crazier. How do you explain to a police officer that you're being framed for drug dealing because you refuse to fund a stranger's education? Officer, I said carefully, this is going to sound insane, but I think someone is trying to systematically destroy my reputation because I wouldn't give them money. Officer Rodriguez studied my face for a long moment, then looked around at my neighbors. Okay, that does sound pretty unusual. Walk me through what happened tonight, starting from the beginning. I took a deep breath and laid it all out, Patricia's visit, her demand for tuition money, her threats, and then the escalation once my neighbors got involved. Officer Rodriguez took notes, occasionally asking clarifying questions, his expression growing more serious with each detail. And you have documentation of these HOA violations she filed, he asked. Mr. Patterson was already pulling up the files on his phone. Dozens of them. Going back years. Most of them for things that aren't even violations according to our actual bylaws. Officer Rodriguez examined the screen, scrolling through the complaints. Grass height measurements that change weekly. Unauthorized vehicles that are clearly just normal cars. Yeah, this looks like harassment. He looked back at me. And tonight she specifically mentioned drug dealing. She said I was probably running drugs to afford this house, Mrs. Chin confirmed. Right in front of all of us. The timing is pretty convenient, Mr. Patterson added. She makes these accusations, and suddenly you're getting anonymous tips about drug activity. My phone buzzed with another notification. The neighborhood Facebook group again. I glanced at it and felt my stomach drop. Officer, she just posted again. I showed him the screen. Patricia's new post read, Update, I've just learned that police have been called to investigate the concerning activities at 847 Maple Street. This confirms my worst fears about what's been happening in our neighborhood. I encourage all parents to keep their children indoors and away from this area until the situation is resolved. Our community's safety must come first. She's posting about the police investigation in real time, I said, my voice rising. She's literally using your visit as proof that her accusations are true. Officer Rodriguez's jaw tightened. That's problematic. Ma'am, this post makes it sound like we found evidence of criminal activity, which we haven't. Mrs. Chen was refreshing her feed. It's getting worse. Look at these comments. The responses were multiplying rapidly. Parents talking about keeping their kids inside. People sharing their own suspicious observations about my house. Someone had posted a blurry photo of my driveway taken from across the street, claiming it showed evidence of unusual traffic patterns. This is spiraling out of control, I said. In 2 hours, she's turned me from an unknown neighbor into a neighborhood pariah. Officer Rodriguez was typing something on his radio. Dispatch, this is Rodriguez. Can you pull the log for the anonymous tips called in about 847 Maple Street tonight? I need timestamps and phone numbers if available. Copy that. He turned back to us. The good news is that false reporting is a crime. If we can establish a pattern of fraudulent calls, especially coordinated with social media posts, that's something we can act on. My phone rang. My stomach dropped when I saw the caller ID. It's my boss, I said. At 10 p.m. I answered reluctantly. Hey, Mike. Derek, what the hell is going on? I just got a call from Janet Morrison. She says she's your neighbor. She's asking about your background checks, whether we've had any issues with you, whether you have access to client data from home. The blood drained from my face. Janet Morrison. She said there are some community safety concerns and she's doing due diligence. She sounded very official, mentioned she was working with local police. Derek, please tell me you haven't done anything stupid. I looked at Officer Rodriguez, who was clearly listening to every word. Mike, I haven't done anything. This woman is harassing me and apparently now she's calling my employer with false accusations. False accusations about what? How do you tell your boss that a neighbor is spreading rumors about you being a drug dealer? How do you explain that your career might be in jeopardy because you wouldn't pay a stranger's college tuition? I need to call you back, I said. But Mike, please don't make any decisions based on that call until you hear from me. Officer Rodriguez was shaking his head grimly. Now she's targeting your employment. This has moved way beyond neighborhood drama. Mike, she called my boss, I said to Officer Rodriguez after hanging up. Janet Morrison, she must be Patricia's sister or something. She's impersonating some kind of official and questioning my employer about background checks and client data access. Officer Rodriguez was already back on his radio. I need a welfare check and possible impersonation investigation. We might have coordinated harassment involving false official representation. Mrs. Chen's phone was buzzing continuously. Derek, this Facebook post is being shared in other neighborhood groups now. Someone cross-posted it to the Riverside community page and the Oakwood Manor group. Look at this, they're calling it Drug House Alert, Maple Street. My hands started shaking as I scrolled through the comments. People I'd never met were sharing the post, adding their own speculation. Someone claimed they'd always wondered about the house since my grandmother died. Another person said they'd noticed increased traffic on our street and now it all made sense. This is insane, I said. 6 months ago I was just a guy who inherited his grandma's house. Now I'm apparently running a drug operation because I wouldn't pay some kid's college tuition. Officer Rodriguez looked up from his radio. Mr. Chen, I need to ask, do you have any idea how many people might have your personal information? Employment details, family connections, that kind of thing. What do you mean? Well, this Janet Morrison person knew exactly who to call at your company. That suggests either research or inside information. The implications hit me like a brick wall. The HOA has all my contact information. Emergency contacts, employer details for insurance purposes. When I updated everything after inheriting the house. Patricia would have access to all of that, Mr. Patterson confirmed. HOA board members can access resident files for legitimate community business. My phone buzzed with a text from my neighbor 3 houses down, someone I'd barely spoken to since moving in. Hey Derek, just wanted to give you a heads up. Patricia Morrison came by about an hour ago asking questions about your activities. Said she was doing a neighborhood safety assessment. Thought you should know. She's going door to door, I realized. While we've been standing here dealing with the police call, she's been canvassing the neighborhood. Officer Rodriguez's expression darkened. That's witness tampering if she's trying to generate false reports. How many houses are we talking about? There are 47 homes in this HOA, Mr. Patterson said. If she's hitting even half of them with this story. Mrs. Chen was getting a phone call. She answered, listened for a moment, then covered the phone. It's my sister in Riverside. She's asking if we're safe, if we should stay somewhere else tonight. The Facebook post made it sound like there's an active drug house next door to us. I felt like I was watching my entire life collapse in real time. Officer, what happens if my boss decides I'm too much of a liability? What happens when clients see this stuff online? Let's focus on what we can control right now, Officer Rodriguez said, but his tone suggested he understood the gravity of the situation. I'm going to need to speak with Patricia Morrison tonight. Can you show me where she lives? 2 streets over, Mr. Patterson said. But Derek, you should know, she just pulled into her driveway. I can see her headlights from here. We all turned to look. Sure enough, a silver SUV was parking in Patricia's driveway, and I could see her silhouette moving around inside the vehicle. She's been out this whole time, I said. While the police were here investigating her false reports, she was out there poisoning the well. Officer Rodriguez was heading toward his patrol car. I'm going to have a conversation with Ms. Morrison right now. You folks stay here. Wait, I called after him. What do I do about my job? About all these posts online. He paused. Document everything. Screenshot every post, save every message. And Mr. Chin. This isn't over, but you're not fighting it alone anymore. I watched Officer Rodriguez's taillights disappear around the corner toward Patricia's house, then turned to face the Chens and Mr. Patterson. My phone was still buzzing with notifications, but for the first time in hours, I felt like I could actually think clearly. We need to stop playing defense, I said, pulling up my laptop. Mrs. Chen, can you help me screenshot everything she's posted tonight? Mr. Patterson, I need you to walk me through the exact HOA bylaws about board member conduct. For the next hour, we worked systematically. Mrs. Chen captured every Facebook post, comment, and share. I pulled up Patricia's HOA violation reports from the past year and cross-referenced them with the timestamps of her social media activity. Mr. Patterson dictated the specific sections of our community charter that prohibited harassment and misuse of official positions. Then my phone rang. Officer Rodriguez. Mr. Chen, you need to hear this. Ms. Morrison just confessed to filing the false police reports. She also admitted to accessing your HOA file to get your employment information. I put him on speaker. What did she say exactly? She claimed she was protecting the neighborhood from an obvious drug dealer and that she knew you were hiding something because nobody your age inherits that much money legally. She said the police reports were preventive measures and contacting your employer was due diligence. Mr. Patterson leaned forward. Officer, as HOA secretary, I need to inform you that accessing resident files for personal vendettas violates our charter and could constitute identity theft under state law. Already on it. We're filing charges for false reporting, harassment, and misuse of personal information. But here's the interesting part, her son was there during our conversation. My heart stopped. Bryce was there. Kid looked mortified. Turns out he didn't know about any of this. When he heard what his mother had been doing, he completely broke down. Started apologizing, said he never asked her to harass you, and that he was actually planning to enroll in community college and work part-time. The irony hit me like a truck. Patricia had destroyed her own family's reputation for a kid who never wanted her help in the first place. There's more, Officer Rodriguez continued. The son asked to speak with you directly. Says he has something important to tell you about his mother's HOA activities. Something about financial records. 2 hours later, Bryce Morrison sat in my kitchen, looking like he'd aged 5 years in one night. He'd brought a box of documents he'd taken from his mother's home office. She's been skimming from the HOA budget for 3 years, he said quietly. Pool maintenance, landscaping contracts, emergency repairs, she's been inflating invoices and pocketing the difference. I found out when I needed money for college applications and saw all these cash deposits in her account that didn't match her salary. I stared at the evidence spread across my grandmother's kitchen table. Fake invoices, altered bank statements, a whole system of petty embezzlement that probably totaled $50,000. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Bryce looked up with tears in his eyes. Because she destroyed your life tonight over money that was never even hers to begin with. And because. He took a shaky breath. Because your grandmother used to slip me $20 every time she saw me walking to my job at the grocery store. She said education was important and she was proud of me for working hard. The room went quiet. Mrs. Chen reached over and squeezed my hand. She would have been proud of you tonight too, she said softly. For standing up to someone who thought they could buy their way through life with other people's money. I looked around the kitchen where my grandmother had taught me that integrity wasn't negotiable and realized that Patricia Morrison had just learned the same lesson, the hard way.